A millionaire, while visiting his parents' grave, accidentally saw a homeless boy placing bread on a grave. A few days later, the millionaire threw his younger brother in jail because the strange boy— "He's come to visit his mother again, hasn't he?" Eleanor said, tugging the blanket tighter over her thin shoulders. "I wonder where he gets that bread." The gatekeeper didn't answer. He simply gave a short nod, more out of habit than understanding, then turned back to his thermos of weak coffee. Eleanor remained at her window. The porch light behind her threw a faint shadow against the glass. She stood as she always did, shoulders bent, hands clasped in front of her like someone waiting for a guest who would never quite arrive. Outside, the rain sifted down slowly, whispering across the cemetery trees like a lullaby only the dead could hear. The car pulled in, slow and deliberate. A black Mercedes, its paint dulled slightly by years of weather and not enough care. The man who stepped out looked as if he belonged in a different setting altogether. A boardroom, a gallery opening, perhaps a lonely penthouse where dinner was always reheated and wine never quite finished. Raymond Whitmore, mid-40s, millionaire, quiet, private, always alone. The kind of man who had everything except someone waiting for him at home. He came late, always late, not because he forgot, but because daylight hours belonged to investors, boards and assistants who knocked too softly when the news was bad. Nights, though, those were for the things that no longer demanded his attention, but somehow still had claim to his conscience. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes as he walked to the familiar headstone. His parents, side by side, names etched in soft granite, worn at the corners by time and wind. He stood without speaking, hands in his coat pockets, a man used to silence more than speech. But something made him stop halfway. A few paces ahead, down a small incline beneath a cedar tree, there was another grave, older, simpler, no flowers, just a weathered stone and a child. Raymond froze. A child knelt before it, small, still, soaked. A loaf of bread rested on the grave, wrapped haphazardly in what looked like a torn paper bag. The boy wasn't praying. He wasn't moving much at all, just kneeling. His head was slightly bowed, his hands on his knees. There was a stillness about him that didn't match his age. Raymond found himself stepping forward. He didn't speak, not at first. The boy didn't flinch at his approach. Perhaps he was used to being ignored or watched from a distance. People often did both, without ever crossing the line into actual contact. Only when Raymond reached within a few feet did the boy look up. His face was pale and tight, freckles dim under the rain. His eyes were too old for his cheeks. "She's not cold," the boy said flatly, answering a question that hadn't been asked. "The ground keeps her warm." Raymond blinked. He looked at the bread. "That for her?" The boy nodded. "It's soft today. Yesterday it wasn't. They let me have one." "From where?" The boy shrugged. "Back of Miller's. Sometimes the bread's not too moldy." Raymond glanced around. No bag, no coat, no sign of shelter. "How old are you?" 7. No hesitation. Raymond squatted down, joints creaking. "What's her name?" The boy turned to the stone. His hand brushed the letters. Margaret Thompson. No dates, no epitaph. Just the name. "Her name was Maggie, but I called her Mum." He said it with a plainness that hurt more than any sob. Raymond stayed quiet. The rain had begun to trail down his neck, soaking into his collar. He looked at the boy's sleeves, frayed at the ends, cuffs heavy with water. "You come here often?" "Every Sunday, and Tuesdays, and the days I don't get caught." Raymond was about to speak when the boy added, "I only cry sometimes." "Not every time." A slow breath came from Raymond's chest. "I'm not going to ask you to leave." The boy didn't answer, but his shoulders dropped slightly. Relief, maybe, or just less weight to hold. Up on the hill, a dim porch light flickered. Eleanor Grant's window watched like an old eye that didn't blink. "She used to hum at night," the boy said suddenly, "even when we didn't have lights, just so I'd think everything was fine." The sentence hit the ground like a stone. "I remember," Raymond said, though he didn't. The boy finally turned to look at him properly. "Who did you come for?" "My parents." Raymond hesitated, then added, "They weren't great people, not to me at least." The boy nodded once. "Then maybe they're neighbors now." It should have sounded childish. It didn't. A gust of wind passed through the trees. The bread bag fluttered. Raymond stood up, brushing his knees, and without asking, took off his coat and draped it over the boy's shoulders. "It's not warm," he said simply, "but it's dry." The boy didn't resist. He pulled the coat tighter around himself and looked down at the loaf. "She liked rye. This one's white, but I didn't get to choose." Raymond didn't speak again. He just stepped back, nodded once, and turned toward his car. But he didn't drive away. He sat behind the wheel, rain now drumming on the roof. He looked through the misted windshield. The boy was still kneeling. And he stayed there a long time. Long enough that Raymond didn't remember when he started the engine. The blinds in Raymond's office were always closed after dusk. He didn't like the idea of being watched, not because he had something to hide, but because some grief prefers darkness. He sat behind his desk, coat still on, reading a slim manila file. His hands, normally steady, held the pages like they might bruise. Outside, the city moved on without him. The woman's name was Margaret Thompson, 40 years old, deceased, widow, no living parents, no siblings, one son. Raymond set the file down. The private investigator had done his job, efficient, clean, but blunt. Like reality often is. Her death had been ruled an accident, crossed the street, hit by a car that fled the scene. No charges. The case closed in less than a week. But that wasn't the truth. 2 days earlier, Margaret had filed a draft report to the sheriff's office. It was unsigned. It claimed repeated harassment, threats, even sexual assault, from someone powerful, someone connected. The name on the draft was Victor Whitmore. Raymond leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on the ceiling. Victor, his brother, his blood. He hadn't spoken to Victor in over a year. They shared no business, no holidays, no real conversations. But he had no reason to suspect, or maybe he had, just not the courage to look at it. Victor had always lived in the grey. He had money, influence, a sharp jaw, and a sharper tongue. People did what he asked because he knew how to make them feel it was their idea. And if they didn't, that's where Donald Reeves came in. Donald was Victor's personal attorney, high-paid, high-profile, and low conscience. The file showed that Reeves had intervened immediately after Margaret's death. He'd paid off the property manager, cleared her name from the lease, closed her bank account, and sealed the police records under a privacy clause. Quiet, quick, permanent. Raymond closed the file. It didn't weigh much, but it felt like a cinder block in his chest. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Paul Reynolds, the cemetery caretaker, was watering the grass near the south wall when Raymond arrived. "Back again?" Paul asked, nodding toward the familiar grave. "Yeah," Raymond said. "I need to ask you about Margaret Thompson." Paul blinked slowly. "Don't get many questions about her. Folks around here mostly forgot." Raymond waited. "She came here a lot, kept her mother's grave clean, used to bring her son, quiet boy, wore a red jacket even in summer, never caused trouble." Paul paused. She had this way of looking at him, not with fear, not shame, just as if he was the only thing in the world not broken. At a market near the edge of town, Carla Monroe was stocking onions when Raymond approached. "She used to buy bruised fruit," Carla said, after he asked. Didn't complain, just picked the soft ones off the pile and smiled like she got a discount. She ever talked to you? Raymond asked. Not much, Carla replied. Once, she came in with a cut on her lip, said she fell. I didn't ask, but I've seen that kind of fall before. Raymond walked 4 blocks further, found himself knocking at a narrow brick house with wind chimes that didn't chime. Abigail Foster, 3rd grade teacher, opened the door in a cardigan 2 sizes too big. I remember Caleb, she said softly, standing in her doorway. Margaret was always early for parent meetings, always asked about reading, never missed a homework check. Abigail stepped aside and let him into a quiet living room. After she passed, he stopped coming. No note, no withdrawal form, just disappeared. I filed a welfare concern. Got a form response 2 weeks later. No action. She looked down at her tea. They said she was unstable, that she had episodes, that her child was better off in foster care, but he wasn't placed anywhere. He just vanished. Raymond said nothing. He didn't have words for the particular kind of rot that grows behind official smiles. At the apartment complex where Margaret had once lived, Patrick Doyle leaned against the doorframe like he didn't care whether it stayed open. Paid rent on time, Patrick said, but she gave people the creeps, always checking over her shoulder, like someone was watching. His wife, Nancy, voice sharp from inside. That boy's still hanging around a few streets over. Stays by the laundromat. Should have called someone. He don't belong out there. Raymond stared at the hallway for a long time before leaving. Near the edge of town, Raymond found Vera Sims behind her chain-link fence. She wore a yellow robe and suspicion-like cologne. Oh, her, Vera snorted. Always thought she was better than us. Never waved. I told people. Something wasn't right. A woman that quiet's got secrets. You told people what exactly? I told them to keep their kids away. I didn't like the way she stared at folks. And I wasn't the only one. Raymond turned to leave. Vera called after him. You know, there was a reporter. Wrote a whole thing on her. You should find it. Said everything you need to know. The article was still online. Cynthia Marks. Headline: Shadow Woman. A tragedy nobody saw coming. Raymond read the piece under the pale glow of his dashboard. It painted Margaret as unstable, erratic, isolated. The piece quoted neighbors who felt unsafe and cited a suspicious past without any verified sources. The comments section had turned off long ago. He called the number on her author page. Cynthia answered on the second ring. I want to know why you wrote that, he said. Public interest, she said flatly. She wasn't public. She was alone. And your article made sure she stayed that way. She was mentally unwell, Cynthia replied. Check the reports. I have. Raymond paused. His voice was calm, but unshakable. You were part of killing her. She hung up. That night, Raymond stood again at Margaret's grave. The rain wasn't falling, but the wind was cold. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't speak. But something in his face, something quiet and full of apology, leaned forward. A voice behind him murmured, The boy's name is Caleb. Raymond turned. Eleanor Grant, standing just behind the gate, her eyes soft. I figured you'd want to know, she said. You were here long enough. Raymond nodded, the name solid in his mind now, like a key. I'll find him, he said. Eleanor gave a small smile, half sad, half proud. You might already have. The air carried the smell of damp stone and something older, like metal and pine bark. Rain slid in sheets over the chapel roof across the cemetery, tapping out a rhythm that neither hurried nor paused. A low fog hung just above the ground, as if the earth itself were exhaling. From behind the black iron gate, Raymond watched. The boy was there again. Same thin coat, Same silence. This time, he sat under the stone archway near the caretaker's shed, his knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped around them like a fortress. The bread was still in his lap, untouched. Raymond didn't approach. He placed a thermos of warm tea on the brick ledge a few feet away, left a dry wool scarf folded beside it, and stepped back. Caleb didn't speak, but this time he didn't flinch either. That was something. Over the next few days, it became a kind of rhythm. Raymond never said too much. He'd arrive with something small, a granola bar, a blanket, a paperback copy of The Wind in the Willows, and leave it within reach. Caleb never asked questions, but slowly the space between them began to narrow. One evening, Raymond found the scarf tied around a tree trunk like a flag. Another day, the book had moved, opened to chapter 3. The spine curved gently like it had been read and folded closed without haste. Still, the boy never thanked him, not with words. But he stayed. It was the coldest night of the month when things changed. The rain had come earlier than forecasted, heavier. Raymond's shoes sank into soft mud as he stepped through the cemetery gate. The fog was thicker now, making the headstones blur into shapes more imagined than real. Caleb wasn't at his usual spot. Panic came quick, uninvited. Raymond searched the arches, the caretaker's shed, the rows of low stones. Then he saw it. A small shape curled on the wooden bench near the far wall, barely shielded by the overhang. The boy was asleep, soaked through. One hand clutching the crust of yesterday's bread, the other tucked under his cheek. Raymond didn't call out. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked forward, removed his coat, and gently wrapped the boy in it. Caleb stirred as he was lifted, but didn't resist, didn't cry. He just sighed, low and raspy, and rested his head against Raymond's shoulder, like someone who had no strength left for suspicion. The car ride was silent. Raymond kept the heater on high. He glanced over a few times, unsure whether the boy was asleep or simply refusing to speak. By the time they arrived at Raymond's townhouse, Caleb's clothes were damp but no longer dripping. Raymond carried him inside without a word, set him gently on the living room couch, and disappeared into the hallway. When he returned, he held a towel, a clean t-shirt far too large, and a pair of sweatpants cinched with a drawstring. "I'll leave these here," he said. "Bathroom's to the right." He didn't watch the boy change. He didn't hover. He just sat across the room in an old armchair, holding a folded piece of flannel, an old shirt that had belonged to his son. Not looking for sympathy, just waiting. Caleb emerged slowly, eyes darting like a cornered cat's. The shirt swallowed him. The sweatpants dragged slightly on the floor. "You can stay here as long as you want," Raymond said quietly, more out of instinct than design. "No one's going to make you call anyone anything. Not here." Caleb didn't respond, but he sat down on the floor, near the edge of the rug, legs crossed, staring at the wall like he was trying to memorize it. The next morning, Emily arrived. She is the daughter of Dean Carter, Raymond's close lawyer friend. Emily knocked only once before letting herself in, holding a plastic tray full of potted seedlings and 2 gardening trowels sticking out of her coat pocket. "Is that him?" she whispered to Raymond, who nodded once. Emily knelt beside Caleb, didn't ask his name, didn't offer hers. She just held up a pot of marigold sprouts. "These look weak, but they're not," she said. "The leaves bend. That's not the same as breaking." Caleb looked at her, unsure. "You want to help plant them?" He didn't nod, but he stood and followed. That evening they had dinner at the long oak table near the window. Raymond served spaghetti. It was store-bought, overcooked slightly, and awkwardly portioned, but Caleb didn't complain. They ate in silence, but for the first time, Caleb didn't hunch over his plate. He didn't shield it with his elbows like it might be taken away. He chewed slowly, swallowed, reached for a glass of water. "Tomorrow," Raymond said, "I'll make something better." Caleb looked up, not long, not even directly, but just enough to register it. And for Raymond, that was a beginning. That night, after the boy had fallen asleep curled up on the couch under 2 blankets, Raymond stepped out onto the porch. The rain had stopped. He sat on the wooden step, hands resting on his knees, and looked out over the streetlight-glazed pavement. Inside, a child breathed softly. Somewhere, a woman named Margaret was buried under damp earth and a crooked stone. He couldn't rewrite what had happened, but he could hold space for what came next, and maybe, just maybe, begin to call it something like healing. The first few mornings passed like whispered questions. Neither of them asked for anything. Caleb stayed in the guest room, but never closed the door all the way. Raymond made breakfast, eggs, toast, nothing fancy, and left the plate on the kitchen island without saying it was ready. Some days, the food disappeared before he came back in the room. Other days, it sat untouched, only to vanish quietly an hour later. They moved around each other like 2 people sharing the same space without expecting to understand it. But somehow, it worked. Raymond tried not to hover. He wasn't sure what a boy like Caleb needed, and he'd learned long ago not to guess when it came to grief. Sometimes it was better to just offer presence than answers. Evenings became their anchor. They started with the same chair, same distance. Raymond on the left side of the worn leather couch, Caleb on the floor with his knees drawn up. The television played quietly, old nature documentaries or slow cartoons without too many colors. Something about the soft narration filled the room without pushing it. One night, Raymond left the remote beside Caleb without a word. The next night, it was Caleb who turned on the TV. Emily visited every other day, sometimes with new plants, sometimes with questions disguised as casual conversation. "You think dogs know when you're sad?" she asked one afternoon while they dug small holes near the fence line. "Or do they just like being close?" Caleb didn't answer, but he pressed his finger into the soil and made a perfect little nest for the marigold's root ball. Later that week, she handed him a small clay pot with yellow petals, just beginning to open. He didn't look at her when he took it. "Emily told me to bring it in," he muttered, placing it on the kitchen table beside the salt shaker. Raymond glanced at it, then at the boy. "Tell her thank you for me." Caleb nodded once, barely. Raymond took him shopping on a Tuesday morning when the grocery store was nearly empty. He didn't mention the outdated shoes or the jacket that still hung too loose. He just pointed to the rows of sneakers. "Your size is somewhere between 7 and 8. Try a few." Caleb bent down awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with the sales clerk. It took 3 pairs before he found something that fit. At the register, Raymond handed over his card without hesitation. He didn't ask if the boy liked them. He just said, "They'll be better for walking." They walked 3 aisles in the store before Caleb said a word. "Can I pick something?" he asked, eyes not quite lifting. "Of course." Caleb wandered toward the dry goods section, stood in front of the noodle shelf for almost 5 minutes before picking up a single pack of plain ramen. Raymond looked at it, then looked at him. "That it?" The boy nodded. Raymond took a second pack and tossed it in. "1 for lunch, 1 for backup." Caleb's lips almost lifted at that. Almost. Did you hear this story before or after dinner? If it was before, leave a comment, book. But if you had a wonderful dinner, write newspaper. On Thursday afternoon, the sky was overcast in a way that made the streets feel hushed. Raymond asked Caleb if he wanted to go somewhere. The boy shrugged, so Raymond drove. They didn't talk much on the way. Caleb sat still, hands folded in his lap, eyes tracing the trees outside the window. When they pulled up to the cemetery gates, he hesitated, then unbuckled his seatbelt without being told. They walked together, not side by side. Not quite. At Margaret's grave, Caleb knelt without prompting. He took a fresh roll from his coat pocket, soft, wrapped in wax paper, and placed it gently at the base of the stone. He didn't speak, just looked at the headstone, then upward. The clouds were moving slowly, patches of light peeking through like something reconsidering the weight it carried. Raymond stayed a respectful distance away. After a while, Caleb stood and looked up at him. "She liked the soft ones," he said. Raymond nodded. Caleb didn't cry. He didn't touch the stone. But when he turned to leave, he didn't drag his feet the way he used to. That night, they sat on the couch again. The television flickered with a program about whales, slow movements beneath dark water. Raymond leaned back. "You ever been to the ocean?" Caleb shook his head. "I don't like places I can't walk home from." Raymond smiled, not at the answer, but at the honesty. "You can walk back from here," Raymond said, "whenever you need." Caleb didn't reply, but he leaned just slightly to the left, closer than before, and for the first time, Raymond didn't feel like he was waiting for something to begin. He was already in the middle of it. The call came late, long after the dishes had been washed and the lights in the hallway dimmed. Raymond stayed in the study when he took it, door halfway closed, voice lowered out of habit, not secrecy. Caleb should have been asleep. He wasn't. The boy had padded down the stairs for water, feet silent on wood, his thin form blending into the shadowed landing just behind the banister. He froze when he heard Dean Carter's name. He didn't mean to listen, but once the first few words landed, his body wouldn't move. His ears wouldn't stop. "I just want to make things right, Dean," Raymond said. "Not for me, for Margaret, for that boy." There was a pause. Dean must have said something in the way only he could. Logical, calm, too gentle to ignore. "I know it won't undo what Victor did," Raymond continued, "but maybe it can clean something. Wash some of that filth off the family name." His voice didn't break, but something behind it sounded like defeat, trying to wear hope as a disguise. "I'm not his father," Raymond added. "But I wasn't there for Margaret. I turned a blind eye. He's all that's left. Maybe this is how I balance it." The line went quiet again, and upstairs, behind the railing, Caleb's fingers clenched to the stairpost so hard the edges left small red dents in his palm. The next morning, the house felt different. It wasn't colder, but something in it had retreated. Raymond placed a plate of eggs and toast on the counter, just like always. But the footsteps never came. He waited. Eventually, he knocked lightly on the guest room door. When it opened, it was only a crack, and Caleb stood on the other side, with the stillness of someone who had just buried something no one else could see. "You okay?" Raymond asked. A small shrug. Not cold, not rude, just distant. "You don't have to eat," Raymond said quietly, "but you should." Caleb nodded once, then closed the door again, slow and soft. By the time Emily stopped by with a tray of new seedlings, lavender this time, Caleb was already in the backyard, standing near the tool shed, but not touching the soil. Emily waved, tried a smile. "Thought you might like to try these. Smell helps some people relax." Caleb looked at the tray, then at her, then at nothing at all. "I don't want to plant anything today." She blinked. "Okay." No anger, no argument. Just the kind of pause people take when they realize they aren't the safe place they thought they were. That night, Raymond came home from a grocery run to find the house too still. The living room untouched, Caleb's shoes missing from the mat. On the dining table, sat a folded piece of paper. No envelope, just one sentence, written in small, careful letters. "I don't need pity. I miss my mother. That's enough." Raymond stood there for too long. He read it once, then again. And then he moved. Fast. Grabbed his coat. Slammed the door harder than he meant to. The storm outside had already started, thick raindrops hitting the windshield like gravel as he pulled out of the driveway. He searched the streets first. The usual places. The park bench near the laundromat. The closed diner with the overhang. The alley behind Carla's store. Nothing. By the time he reached the bus stop near Lincoln and 12th, his breath was shallow and fast, his hair soaked through. He walked through puddles without noticing, called Caleb's name. Once, then again, softer. Every face he passed looked like a blur, like someone he wasn't sure he knew. He kept running. 2 blocks away, on the corner of a rain-slicked street, a black car idled quietly. Its windows were tinted. Its driver wore tailored wool and watched everything. Victor Whitmore sat behind the wheel. In the passenger seat, Donald Reeves scanned his phone screen, half listening to the drizzle tapping the windshield. "You sure about this meeting spot?" Victor asked, adjusting the rearview mirror. Donald nodded, bored. Less cameras, less noise. Victor looked up again, and this time he saw him. Raymond, soaked, frantic, darting across the intersection, eyes wide, breath fogging in the cold. Victor's eyes narrowed. He watched as his older brother turned into an alleyway, shouting something too distant to hear. Then Victor spoke, almost to himself. "Who the hell is he chasing?" Donald didn't answer. He hadn't looked up. Victor tapped the glass with a single knuckle. "It's just a kid. But why's Ray losing his mind over a kid?" He leaned forward, fingers steepled against his lips. "Interesting." Meanwhile, Raymond stopped near an old laundromat, bent forward, hands on his knees. He was out of breath. Rain clung to his face, and for a brief second, he thought of Margaret, not as a ghost or a name, but as someone real. Someone who had once walked through a storm like this, carrying a boy she'd promised to protect. And now, it was his turn. His lungs burned, but he kept going. Because some things you don't run from, you run toward. Donald Reeves lit a cigar inside his office, even though the building technically didn't allow it. The smoke curled upward, like a thought he didn't want to share. Across his desk sat Victor Whitmore, freshly shaven, suit impeccable, eyes cold. The kind of cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Donald tapped a folder. "He's still with the boy." Victor didn't blink. "Still?" "Every day this week. And now he's skipped 2 board meetings. Told his assistant he's not taking calls. Even pulled out of the Arizona project." Victor looked out the window, though it was just a reflection of himself he saw. "He's losing control," Donald added, tone casual, like he was reading off market trends. "Investing too much. Emotional proximity leads to public risk." Victor finally turned. "The boy. Caleb Thompson. Margaret's son." "Yes," Donald said, slow, deliberate. "The woman you handled." Victor's jaw flexed, but he didn't respond to the implication. Donald leaned forward. "We need to get ahead of this, before Raymond gets righteous and starts digging." Victor gave a short nod. "Make it clean." Donald raised an eyebrow. "You sure? No scandals, no noise. Just remind him where silence comes from." Donald stubbed out the cigar. "I know someone." Greg Mathers was the kind of man who never asked why, just how much. He got the name, the car make, the address. "He likes underground garages," Donald had said. "Always leaves late. Take the chance. No weapons." Greg cracked his knuckles and smiled. Just a little tap on the shoulder. That evening, Raymond walked alone to his car in the lower lot beneath his office building. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, echoing with the emptiness of 11:30 p.m. He didn't notice the shadow until it moved. Then, suddenly, two hands shoved him against the hood of his Lexus. Greg's voice was quiet, almost amused. Funny how some people forget what family silence is worth. Raymond tried to shove him off, but Greg was quick. Not skilled, just mean. A fist landed against Raymond's ribs. Not hard enough to break, just bruise, just remind. "You don't get to rewrite history, old man," Greg hissed. "Some things stay buried. Got it?" But before Greg could land another hit, a voice cut the air. "Police!" Officer Ray Collins had been driving past, off shift, when the movement in the shadows caught his eye. He didn't hesitate. In 3 strides, he was behind Greg, yanking him off Raymond and forcing him to the pavement. Handcuffs clicked into place a second later. "You all right, Mr. Whitmore?" Ray asked. Raymond nodded slowly, catching his breath. Ray looked at the man on the ground, then back to Raymond. "You want to press charges?" Raymond didn't answer right away. He looked at Greg's face, still half smirking, and then said, "No, but I want a name." Greg stayed silent. Ray leaned in. "You want assault to be the least of your worries? Start talking." Greg swallowed hard. "Reeves. He sent me." Raymond didn't go home. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, palms gripping the wheel, knuckles white. He thought of Margaret. How scared she must have been when she filed that complaint. How alone she must have felt. How everyone must have looked away. How he himself looked away. Not this time. The next morning, Dean Carter called. "We might have found him," he said. Raymond's heart skipped. "A trucker at the old gas station near 78 said there's a kid sleeping near the dumpsters. Keeps his hood up. Won't talk to anyone. Been there a few nights." Raymond didn't even respond. Just hung up, grabbed his coat, and drove. The wind hit hard along the old quarry road. Rusted fencing and signs half blown off their hinges lined the lot. The gas station stood hollow behind thick smudged windows. Behind it, near the back wall, half hidden between 2 trash bins, was a boy. Caleb sat, arms around his knees, his hoodie soaked and sagging. His breath came in shallow clouds. Raymond didn't rush him. He parked, stepped out, walked, stopped 5 feet away and crouched slowly, eye level. No speeches, no apologies rehearsed. Just the truth. "I'm not perfect," Raymond said, "but I'm not leaving. Not again." Caleb didn't answer. His eyes flicked up. There was no accusation in them, only weariness, as if trust had become too expensive to give away freely. Raymond shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around the boy. He didn't pull, didn't demand, just let the coat stay there. Caleb closed his eyes. Not from sleep, but from something softer, like permission, like maybe, for now, he didn't have to run. That night, Raymond didn't call Dean. He didn't answer the board. He didn't return the email from a senator's aide asking for a quote. He just sat on the floor of the living room, beside the couch where Caleb had curled beneath a blanket, and watched the slow rise and fall of his chest. Victor had made a move, but this time Raymond wasn't flinching. The courtroom wasn't large. It smelled of old paper, floor wax, and the weight of decisions made behind closed doors. Sunlight filtered in through tall windows, but didn't warm the wood-paneled walls. It just made the dust visible. Caleb sat beside Emily on the long bench in the 3rd row. His legs didn't quite reach the floor. Emily whispered something, probably about the judge's glasses or the sound of the fan overhead. Caleb didn't laugh, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. That was enough. Up front, Dean Carter organized his files with the precision of a man who preferred truth to theatrics. Raymond sat a row behind him, silent, suit clean, but wrinkled at the knees from worry. He wasn't here as a businessman today. He was here as someone trying to be more than a witness to someone else's pain. Judge Henry Malone entered quietly. Grey suit, tired eyes, posture like a man still holding something heavy. Dean stood. Your Honor, we're here to file a formal petition for civil and criminal investigation into the death of Margaret Thompson. Judge Malone blinked slowly. That case was closed. Dean nodded. And improperly, we believe. With due respect, we bring new testimony, new evidence, and witnesses prepared to testify under oath. Malone looked down at the file Dean had placed before him. Then he looked at Caleb, still, small, but unflinching. He sighed. Proceed. The first to speak was Dr. Olivia Brooks. She didn't wear a lab coat, just a blue blouse and a pair of glasses she kept adjusting. I saw Margaret Thompson twice, she said. The second time, she came in with deep bruising, defensive wounds. I asked if she had insurance. She didn't. I told her I couldn't treat her without it. She looked down. She didn't argue. She just nodded like she expected it, like she'd already rehearsed not being helped. There was silence. I've regretted it ever since, Olivia said, because later that week I heard she died. I'm sure she shows signs of being abused. Dean didn't need to say anything. He let the quiet hang, heavy as it should. Then came Lucy Jennings, elderly but alert, her cane tapping softly as she walked. She came to me crying, Lucy said. At the church. She thought someone was watching her. Said if anything happened, people wouldn't believe her. Her voice cracked, not from emotion, but from age carrying too much memory. She was right. From the back, Noah Ellis, a trucker with rough hands and a bull cap in his grip, stepped up next. I was hauling sheetrock, he said. Stopped for coffee that day. I saw him, Victor Whitmore, yelling at her, real close. She looked scared. I didn't know what to do, so I just drove off. That's on me. Raymond lowered his eyes. Even strangers were trying harder than he had. Then Joanna Fields came forward. She looked nervous. I used to work her case, she said. When Margaret applied for housing assistance, she was denied. I didn't push back. She looked toward Caleb. I met her son recently, and it's clear. She wasn't unstable. She was scared and cornered. I failed her, but I want to help now. Judge Malone didn't look up. He was writing. Finally, Officer Ray Collins approached the stand with a USB drive in his palm. I confiscated this during an unrelated arrest. It's a recording, audio, a conversation between Greg Mathers and another party. He placed it on the evidence table. I didn't bring it forward before. I wasn't sure it would matter. Malone raised a brow. Does it now? Collins nodded. It names Victor Whitmore and Donald Reeves, discussing Margaret and cleaning up. Their words. The judge didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, he looked toward Caleb. You understand what's happening here? He asked gently. Caleb nodded once. You're very brave, Malone said, almost too quietly to be heard. Raymond sat up straighter. Dean stepped forward. We request official reopening of the investigation, civil charges, criminal proceedings, and witness protection for both the boy and key informants. Malone folded his hands. This court will review all submitted materials within the next 48 hours. He looked at each person in the room, one by one. And if the evidence holds, we will proceed. The gavel did not fall. He didn't adjourn. He simply stood and left the bench. The silence after was thicker than anything said aloud. Outside the courthouse, the sky was wide and cloudless. Caleb sat on the steps, Emily beside him, her knees drawn up. You okay? She asked. Caleb nodded after a pause. They believed her. Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. Inside the building, Raymond shook Dean's hand. "We're not done," Dean said. Raymond nodded. "But we started." And sometimes, in a world that forgets too quickly, that's everything. Courtroom 2B wasn't made for drama. It was narrow, windowless, and always a little too cold. The kind of room where people whispered not out of respect, but because it didn't feel like the truth could stretch its voice here. But today, the truth did more than stretch. It stood up. Donald Reeves wore a pinstripe suit and a look that belonged on someone who knew how to win before the first objection. He rose slowly, with the air of a man used to delays working in his favor. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "we move to dismiss these proceedings on the grounds of insufficient legal foundation. The alleged audio is inadmissible under Code 293-B and lacks chain of custody. Furthermore," Dean Carter stood without waiting for permission, "we have signed affidavits from Officer Ray Collins and Assistant DA Michelle Rowe. Chain of custody is intact. The recording was obtained legally in connection to an assault investigation." Reeves turned just slightly. "Irrelevant. If every heated conversation was a confession, half of this city would be behind bars." Raymond, seated quietly behind Dean, didn't move, but his eyes were locked on Reeves like a man looking through fog and finally seeing the mountain behind it. The judge didn't respond. He simply nodded at the bailiff. "Play the recording." It began with static, then the unmistakable voice of Greg Mathers. "He said no noise. Just scare him. The old man's got guilt in his veins. Push a little. He backs down." Then another voice. "Donald's. Make it clear. He keeps digging. There won't be a second warning. Victor's name never comes up. Got it?" Greg again. "Sure. But if the kid talks..." A pause. "Donald, quieter now." "He won't. They never do. Just like his mother didn't." The courtroom didn't gasp. It went still. Donald didn't flinch, but something in his jaw pulsed. Judge Malone looked at him for a long time, as if trying to decide whether contempt of court would be enough to satisfy justice. "We'll resume with witness testimony," he said. "Call Gregory Mathers." Greg shuffled in under guard, hands still cuffed loosely. He didn't bother with a suit. His shirt was wrinkled, his stare casual. Dean didn't press him hard. He didn't have to. "Who hired you?" Dean asked. "Donald Reeves," Greg said. "And on whose behalf?" Greg looked at Victor. For the first time, he smiled. Him. Victor Whitmore. Victor didn't move, but the illusion cracked. The quiet charisma, the self-assured calm, fractured in the corners like a painting too long in the sun. Dean nodded once. No further questions. Reeves declined cross-examination. Then Caleb stood. No one had called him. No one expected him to speak. But he stepped forward anyway, a small cloth in his hands, something wrapped inside. Dean looked up from his table. "Caleb, you don't have to do this." "I want to," Caleb said. He turned toward the judge. "I don't know all the laws, or the big words. I don't understand everything they're saying." He looked at the room, rows of adults, papers, doubt. "I just know my mum." He held up the cloth, unwrapped it. Inside was a small, slightly crushed bread roll, one edge bitten, the rest untouched. "I used to leave these for her, after she died. I thought maybe she could feel it, wherever she was." He paused, swallowed. "People called her crazy, said she lied, said she made things up." His voice stayed steady, not loud, not rehearsed, just real. "She wasn't crazy, she was scared, and no one helped her." He looked directly at Victor. "She didn't have money, or lawyers, or cameras, but she had me. And now, I have her. He turned to the judge. I don't need money. I don't need anyone to say sorry. He lifted the bread gently, like it mattered more than anyone knew. I just need my mum to be believed. One time, that's all. Then he sat back down. The courtroom didn't speak, not right away. Even Judge Malone took longer than usual to respond. He cleared his throat, shifted a paper, but didn't look up. Raymond sat frozen, his hands clenched together, knuckles white. But he didn't move. He didn't wipe his eyes, because he wasn't crying. Not quite. But for the first time in years, maybe longer, he felt like something inside him had stopped apologizing for beating. The ruling came 3 days later. No fanfare, no televised drama, just a printed docket filed under case number 91,483, posted outside courtroom 2B at 7:43 a.m., before the courthouse lights were fully on. Victor Whitmore, convicted. Charges: obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit assault, and unlawful intimidation of a federal witness. Sentence: pending, no bail. Donald Reeves, under investigation, immediate suspension from the bar. License to practice law revoked indefinitely pending full inquiry. Dean Carter read the notice, then turned slowly to Raymond. We did it. Raymond didn't smile, but his voice came back in a way it hadn't before. We spoke. That's what matters. Inside, Judge Malone made it official. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry or proud. He simply sounded like a man who had waited a long time for something honest to land on his bench. I find the testimony consistent, credible, and corroborated by evidence and verified statements, he said, glancing at Caleb briefly. The court acknowledges a grave failure in previous judicial handling and accepts the petition for full criminal proceeding. He tapped the gavel once. It was not a dramatic moment, but it felt like the ground shifted an inch back towards center. Outside, reporters scrambled for angles. But the names that made headlines weren't just Victor's or Donald's. Vera Sims, publicly condemned by the local council, was issued a formal community citation for her role in spreading false claims that contributed to Margaret's isolation. Her name was scrubbed from the Neighborhood Watch Committee and local school board. Patrick and Nancy Doyle faced a civil suit filed by the county's Tenants Association. The case accused them of negligent eviction without due process, as well as willful misinformation in prior tenant assessments. They settled quietly. Caleb would never know the number. Cynthia Marks, the journalist whose article painted Margaret as unstable, was formally reprimanded by the State Press Council. Her publication issued a retraction. She issued a tweet. That was all. But the real change came quietly. Matthew Boyd, once assistant to Donald Reeves, resigned. He left the granite-tiled office downtown, walked away from the tailored suits, and filed a new business license. He joined the legal clinic at the 4th Street Community Center, just blocks from where Margaret used to buy groceries. When asked why, he said, because people like her shouldn't be easy to forget. That Friday, Emily picked up Caleb from the courthouse steps. She was carrying a crumpled bakery box and 2 paper crowns from the party supply store across the street. "What's this?" Caleb asked, frowning. "Victory cake," Emily said. "I let you skip the crown if you at least eat the frosting." He tried not to smile. Failed. Inside the box was a round chocolate cake, half slumped, but decorated with yellow icing that read, in shaky, cursive, "You were right." Raymond stood a few paces away, near the courthouse doors. He didn't interrupt, didn't move forward. He just watched as Caleb took the fork, jabbed at the frosting, and laughed. A sound sharp, short, and bright enough to cut through months of silence. Emily caught Raymond's gaze and nodded. He didn't wave, just nodded back. Because this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of something far more difficult, but also far more real. Later that evening, back home, the house was quiet again, but not empty. The kind of quiet made by safety, not abandonment. Raymond sat in the living room chair, a half-finished book on his lap. Caleb passed behind him, barefoot, hoodie too large. He didn't stop, but he did say something as he walked. "Good night." Raymond looked up. "Sleep well." And that was it. But it was enough. He sat back, exhaled. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was holding someone else's pain. He felt like he was part of something. A boy. A garden. A name restored. Not redemption. Not yet. But something better. Belonging. 10. The morning light came slow, soft and steady, like it had nowhere else to be. Caleb stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the collar of a clean shirt. It wasn't new, but it had been washed the night before, folded with care, and left on the edge of his bed by hands that didn't ask for thanks. He tucked it in carefully, unsure if it looked too stiff, but unwilling to change. Today wasn't about comfort. It was about something else. On the kitchen counter sat a linen napkin, folded tight around a fresh loaf of bread. Round, golden, crust still warm from the oven. Emily had baked it. He'd watched her brush it with egg and sprinkle it with sesame seeds, the way she said her grandmother used to. Now, it was in his hands. The walk to the cemetery was quiet, no clouds, no rain, just birdsong and sidewalks that hadn't yet gathered the footprints of the day. Raymond drove, but he didn't speak. He didn't even turn on the radio. Emily sat in the back with Eleanor Grant beside her, the older woman holding a small bouquet of marigolds wrapped in brown twine. Nobody asked questions. At the gate, Caleb stepped out first. He carried the bread close to his chest, careful not to crush it. The others stayed behind, watching from near the stone wall, where ivy curled between iron bars. No one followed, no one intruded. This was his moment. He walked the familiar path, past rows of names he never knew, to the spot where a simple, unpolished headstone waited. Margaret Thompson, it read. Nothing more. He knelt, laid the bread gently at the base, and bowed his head. "Mum," he whispered. "Today I brought new bread." His voice didn't tremble, his hands didn't shake. "I'm not alone anymore." He stayed there a long time, not talking, not praying, just being, with her, with the space she left, with the part of her that never stopped walking beside him. A breeze rolled through the cemetery, soft but sure, lifting the edge of the napkin slightly. A single marigold petal fluttered free from the bouquet in Eleanor's arms. It floated down in a lazy spiral, landed lightly on the gravestone. Caleb saw it, picked it up, and smiled. Not a wide grin, not the laughter from the courthouse steps, just something gentler, the kind of smile that doesn't ask to be seen. He didn't wipe his eyes. He didn't have to. Back by the gate, Raymond watched, hands in his coat pockets. Emily stood beside him, shoulder brushing his for just a second. "He's okay," she whispered. Raymond nodded, still watching. "He will be." Eleanor took a step forward, then stopped herself. "It's strange," she murmured, "how healing never comes the way we expect it. We think it'll be loud, clear, maybe even dramatic." Emily glanced sideways. "But it's not." "No," Eleanor said. "It's this, a boy, a loaf of bread, and silence that doesn't hurt anymore." Raymond didn't reply, but inside his chest, something shifted. Spring came early that year. In the backyard, the garden Emily and Caleb planted bloomed too fast. marigolds spilling past their borders, lavender thick in the air. Raymond found himself out there more often than he admitted, trimming, watering, once even humming a song he hadn't heard in decades. Emily began taking weekend classes in child psychology. She didn't tell anyone right away, but Caleb found the books on the coffee table. "I think I want to work with kids," she said one evening, peeling carrots while Caleb set the table. "Not fix them, just listen better." Caleb nodded. "You're already good at that." And just like that, the moment passed, but lingered. Dean Carter came by less frequently, but when he did, he brought pastries and stayed for tea. He and Raymond would sit on the porch, talking about things that no longer needed urgency: music, architecture, which coffee shops had the worst chairs. One afternoon, Dean said, "You didn't have to take that boy in, Ray." Raymond sipped his tea. "I didn't. He let me in." Dean smiled. "Still, you didn't choose silence, not like the rest of us." Raymond didn't answer. He didn't need to. In the hallway, Caleb kept a photograph of Margaret. It wasn't much, just a faded image Eleanor had found in an old parish file. Margaret, in a borrowed sweater, eyes tired but kind, holding a baby who could only be Caleb. He didn't cry when he looked at it, but he did sometimes speak, not long sentences, just pieces. "Mum, today I learned to cook eggs." Or, "Mum, Emily and I planted more carrots." And sometimes just, "I miss you." That was enough. One Saturday they went to the lake. Raymond packed sandwiches. Emily brought a kite. Caleb found a patch of dry ground near the reeds and stretched out on his back, arms behind his head. The sky above was wide and forgiving. "Do you think she'd be proud?" Caleb asked, barely more than a whisper. Raymond didn't answer right away. He looked at the water, at the reflection of clouds breaking apart. "Yes," he said, then added, quieter, "And I think she'd want you to know. You never had to earn it." Caleb didn't respond, but his eyes stayed on the sky a long time. That night, back at the house, they made soup together. It wasn't good. The noodles were too soft, the broth too salty, but they laughed. And that laughter, that messy, unremarkable moment, that was the proof of something real. Something lived. Something whole. Weeks later, on a day like any other, Caleb left a new roll of bread on the kitchen table. Not wrapped in cloth, not carried like memory. Just sitting there, waiting to be shared. Raymond picked it up, tore a piece off, handed the rest to Caleb. And they ate. Quietly. Side by side. No ghosts, no storm, just warmth, and the smell of something starting over. Some stories end with thunder, others, like this one, end with the quiet sound of healing, the soft crack of bread being shared, the whisper of a memory no longer heavy with pain. Caleb's journey didn't rewrite the past, but it gave it dignity. And perhaps that's all we can ask for when truth comes late. That it's still heard, still held, still honored. What stayed with you most from this story? Was it the courtroom silence, when a boy told the truth no one had asked for? The loaf of bread carried like a memory? Or maybe it was the ordinary kindness, quiet, consistent, that changed everything. Everyone carries ghosts, some louder than others. But maybe healing looks a little like this, not fixing the broken, but walking with it until it doesn't feel so sharp. I'd love to know, if you were standing in that garden with Caleb, Raymond, and Emily, what would you have said? And if someone you loved had once been forgotten, how would you begin to remember them? We would love to chat and share with you. What is the weather like where you are today? If it is sunny, always bring sunglasses, a hat, and apply plenty of sunscreen. UV rays are really bad. If it is raining heavily, I hope you don't get wet and catch a cold. It's great to see our audience always healthy and happy. See you in the next stories.